Melina was targeted for being very attractive. Mozart was targeted for being very confident and talented. In this movie, someone is being targeted because they know something about someone else that might get that person in trouble. This movie isn't about gang stalking, but some elements are very similar. There is gaslighting involved by one spouse to another. It serves as an example of gaslighting as well as the dangers of accidentally falling in love with a psychopath. Most psychopaths seem normal until you become one of their victims, until you're a threat, an object of jealousy, get in the way, or reject him or her. You don't really know a psychopath until you become one of their victims. It also serves as an illustration of what a gang stalking campaign by one spouse to another may involve. The movie starts with the murder of a wealthy old lady. Her house is up for sale for a long time until a young couple, the Mellons, decide to lease it. A retired police officer, Mr. Ruff, recognizes a Louis Bauer he knew from a long time ago, but one of his colleagues tells him that the guy's name is Mellon. The colleague seems to be messing around with the maid and shares the gossip that the parlor maid told him. The maid told him that Miss Mellon is queer, odd in the mind, and does strange things. The Mellons don't use the top 2 stories of their house, and Mr. Mellon gets upset with his wife and goes out every night. The colleague says it's a queer place. Mr. Ruff told his colleague to play up to the parlor maid so that he knows what's going on in the Mellon's house. The next scene shows Mr. Mellon belittling his wife and then flirting with the parlor maid, Nancy, right in front of her. He tells Nancy how pretty she looks and asks if she could give beauty tips to his wife. He laughs and talks warmly to Nancy after speaking harshly to his wife, who is sitting there and seems to be containing her upset with his flirting. Bella, or Miss Mellon, mentions how humiliating it was for her husband to ask the parlor maid to give her beauty tips, especially since the maid already laughs at her a lot. Her husband blows it off and tells Bella how she's always imagining things. Bella seems frightened at the comment and says that she's been trying to improve and has gotten better. She said that she would improve if her husband were gentle and patient with her. He agrees and gets her excited by asking if he should stay in for the night. She says yes, and he says he'll play her songs on the piano, and she gets happy and says they'll have an evening just like they used to. It's obvious Bella is smitten with her husband. He's in a good mood until he notices a picture missing from the wall. He asks Bella where the picture is, and she said she didn't take it and doesn't know. It seems that she's taken other things before. He moves intimidatingly towards her and demands to know where she put the picture. She says that her kleptomaniac tendencies have improved in the last 2 weeks because she hasn't taken anything and forgotten that she took them. In an effort to pacify him, she finds the picture. He says that this is proof that she took it and hid it. But she tells him that she only knew where it was because that's where it was found the previous times. He tells her she's either lying or losing her wits. At this, she becomes frightened and tells him he promised never to say that to her again. But he continues and says that she has no control over herself, not even her own hands. Her hands, she was fidgeting because he was making her so nervous. He sent her to her room, and in her room, She begs Paul, or Mr. Mellon, to bear with her. He says he doesn't know how much he can take, and he covers his face in exasperation. She falls at the bedside crying, with her head in her hands, and buried in the sheets. He opens one eye to watch her. He slips one of her brooches into his pocket and leaves her crying. He goes downstairs and catches the parlor maid eavesdropping. He mentions it, tells her his wife is queer and not to get upset about it, then makes a move on the maid. He locks the brooch in his desk and seems to be very proud of himself and in a good mood again. He leaves and goes to Residence 14, which is the house next door, and which is vacant. While in her room, Bella notices the gas light dimming on its own. Miss Mellon is seen as the one who is mentally unstable and burdensome. Mr. Mellon appears to be the one to feel sorry for because he has to put up with his wife. There are times when it seems that Mr. Mellon wants the maids to know what's going on and presses the idea that Miss Mellon is mentally unstable. He can probably tell Nancy is a gossip and uses flattery to get her on his side. The maid, Nancy, is used as an accomplice to spread lies about Miss Mellon. Similarly, gang stalkers use the audience or bystanders, especially those who are subordinate or under their influence, to spread rumors and portray the TI in a bad way. These inadvertent accomplices are also used to support or provide evidence against the TI just in case the TI decides to speak out or stand up for him or herself. Mr. Mellon also tries to instigate a rivalry between Nancy and Miss Mellon with his inappropriate flirting. Nancy takes the bait, but Miss Mellon doesn't. Similarly, gang stalkers will try to instigate problems between the TIs and others. The next day, Bella eagerly expects a letter from her cousin Vincent. Nancy told her the letter had arrived, but Paul had already opened it and hid it in a book. Bella insists that there must be a letter from Vincent because she hadn't received one in so long. But Paul told her how she had gone through the letters and didn't find a letter from Vincent. After she leaves the room, Paul reads the letter. It's from her cousins wondering why she hasn't written in so long and asking for her and her husband to visit them. He then reads the Bible and prayed like he just didn't wrong his wife. Mr. Ruff, the retired cop, goes to the realtor and asks about Resident 14. He finds out that Mr. Mellon owns it and won't lease it, refusing 3 good offers. The realtor tells Mr. Ruff that Miss Mellon just had a nervous breakdown from what he understands. Mr. Ruff meets Miss Mellon at the park and asks her to accompany him in buying some poor kid's stuff. Miss Mellon happily watches until her husband shows up unexpectedly and calls her name. She looks horrified, and he grabs her arm and pulls her away. Mr. Ruff notices and is upset. In the next scene, Mr. Mellon is yelling and putting Miss Mellon down. She's not responding and is just cuddling her dog. He sees she's not getting upset and takes the dog away. She just seems tired of his tirades. It appears to be a consistent thing for him to talk down to her. She tiredly asks him why he married her. He says some nasty things, including, when I married you, you were a normal woman, or so I thought. She tells him she didn't like the house, and it it was only since they moved into the house that she has been acting strange. She mentions that he's changed in the way he treats her and asks if he married her for her money. She recalls that he started to treat her badly ever since the day she found an envelope addressed to Louis Bauer. He looks anxious when she talks about the incident and says that he'd forgotten it. He changes his tone and feigns concern, saying that he only wants her to get well. She wants to get away from the house and visit her family. Paul says he doesn't want strangers meddling in their affairs and reminds her that her cousin opposed their marriage. Bella says that they're not strangers, they're her family, and is adamant about going to see them. Paul says that if she sees anyone, it'll be a doctor. Bella doesn't want to see a doctor and is so upset she asks Paul to leave her alone. He seems happy and satisfied to have tormented her. He suddenly gets affectionate, playing on her emotions and love for him. She practically clings to every kind word and affection he gives her. He says he'll take her out for the evening. She gets excited, and it seems that he hasn't taken her out in a long time. He says that she must promise to be good and on her best behavior. Then he sets her up by telling her to wear the brooch he bought her when they got engaged. This is presumably the brooch that he slipped into his pocket during the missing picture incident. The next scene shows Bella frantically getting dressed to go out. She asks Nancy, who was helping her to get dressed, to get her brooch. Nancy can't find it. When she presents herself to Paul, he admires her dress and notices that she isn't wearing the brooch. She says she would have worn it, but it didn't go with the dress. He admires her purse and then tells her to fix her hair while he holds it. While fixing her hair, he slips the brooch into her purse. At the concert, he tells Bella how she's the most beautiful of all. When he notices that she's engrossed in the concert, he reaches for his watch and looks at her suspiciously. She is frightened at the mere expression on his face and says that she didn't know anything about it and asks him not to look at her that way. He asks her to see her purse, and she starts having an anxiety attack. He finds the watch, and she loudly exclaims how she didn't put it there, disrupting the concert. Bella gets nauseous and has to leave. Everybody is watching, and he lovingly takes her away, calling her princess and acting as if this was typical of her. He apologizes for his wife, and someone offers to call a doctor, but he says no. Everyone at the concert was wondering about what was going on with Miss Mellon. He refused to talk to her the whole cab ride home, though she begged him to say something, anything, to her. From what the realtor said, it seemed that Mr. Mellon obviously had been spreading rumors about his wife, and the public incident was meant to confirm those rumors. Nancy was secretly jealous of Miss Mellon, and it showed when she refused to help Miss Mellon choose a cloak and then made a face when she left. The concert scene is where Mr. Mellon uses society to humiliate, control, and prove his wife is the crazy or bad one, not him. That is a lie that the truth will soon reveal. Setups are common in gang stalking campaigns. The isolation from family, similar to Mr. Mellon keeping Bella from her family, is also typical. Gang stalkers also try to instigate problems between family members, like Paul tried to do with Bella. The isolation helps the setup because the target will have little to no people on his or her side. Mr. Mellon was psychologically and emotionally abusive to his wife. He constantly put her down or gave backhanded compliments. T.I.'s faced constant psychological and emotional abuse, worse than Bella, even worse than some people could ever imagine. There are many reasons why a person is targeted for a gang stalking campaign. Bella found out something about her husband that he didn't want anybody to know. She didn't even know that what she found was significant, but just realized that he suddenly became very mean to her. T.I.'s experienced the same transition. One day, everything starts to change for the worse. Things keep going wrong. Bad days turns into bad weeks, into bad months, and even bad years. Random people are rude wherever they go and no matter what they do. And so on and so on. Things fall apart until it seems as if they're falling apart. But just like Bella, the T.I. is being gaslighted. Almost everything is staged, manipulated, exaggerated, and just plain off, all leading to the setup, where the public becomes the audience for the T.I. acting out after so much psychological, emotional, and sometimes physical abuse in a scene staged by random or seemingly random gang stalkers to prove the rumors, lies, and misinformation that the T.I. didn't know or only suspected was being told about him or her. When they got home, Mr. Mellon told Miss Mellon that she made his life a misery at home with her stealing, lying, and pickpocketing, but she shouldn't have shamed him in public. She denied taking the watch, so he asked about the brooch, knowing fully well where it was. Miss Mellon said if the brooch is gone, someone else must have taken it. He calls in the maids, and she asks him not to question the maids in front of her. He questioned the maids anyway, had them swear they didn't take the brooch, and kiss the Bible. Miss Mellon rushed to do the same when the maids left. Mr. Mellon implied that she was lying, then told her she was mad and would die in an asylum. She was so horrified and distressed that she just quietly left the room. He then makes out with the maid. Mr. Mellon goes next door and crosses over the balcony to his house. While in her room, Miss Mellon sees that the gas light dims and hears the stomping upstairs in one of the top two floors that they didn't use. She frantically calls for the maid, but it's quiet by the time the maid comes. The maid babies Miss Mellon and admits that Mr. Mellon said something about Miss Mellon going crazy. Miss Mellon starts to believe that she is really going crazy. When the maid leaves, the stomping begins again. Mr. Ruff finds evidence that Mr. Mellon is really Louis Bauer and says he needs evidence, but Miss Mellon is the only one who can help him. His colleague says that Miss Mellon is crazy, showing that word is getting around that she is crazy. Mr. Ruff says that she will go crazy, even though she's not, if she stays around her husband any longer. He had written a letter to her cousin to come to town. The cousin arrives and goes to visit Miss Mellon, but Mr. Mellon refused to let him see her and told the maid to not tell Miss Mellon that the cousin was there. Mr. Mellon had isolated his wife from her family, the maids, and the rest of the general public. With the rumors and setup, he isolated her from the maids and the public by presenting her as mentally ill or unstable. He falsely accused her of being a kleptomaniac and consistently harassed her at home with malevolent, staged incidents. There was no financial devastation in the movie. Similarly, not every TI is going to go broke. That is one of the gang stalker's goals, but it doesn't always work out. There are wealthy TIs, but that doesn't mean they suffer any less. As in Miss Mellon's case, gang stalkers will go after their money through false accusations, estate lawyers, insincere marriages or relationships, scams, etc. Like Mr. Mellon, they could try to make the person seem mentally unstable or incapable of managing their finances so that they could have the TI placed in a psychiatric facility, take unnecessary or impairing medication, be forced to have an allowance while a gang stalker manages their finances, etc. There are cases where one spouse will turn on the other and try to have the other spouse committed. Mr. Mellon is angry about the visit. He is angry and accuses his wife of writing complaints about him to her cousin. He tells her she's a lunatic when she denies it. He says she will see several doctors the next day and she falls on her knees asking him not to do it. He probably would have made sure the doctors found her mentally ill. He tells her he hates her, knowing that she loved him very much and that would hurt her. After making sure to get his wife certified in the morning, he goes to a musical with the maid. Mr. Ruff visits Miss Mellon and tells her what he thinks. Miss Mellon tells him what she knows. The pieces start to fit together, and it turned out Mr. Mellon murdered his own aunt for her jewels and was still married to another woman in a different country. Mr. Ruff explains that since Miss Mellon found the envelope with Mr. Mellon's real name on it, she became a danger. But instead of murdering his wife for fear of an inquiry, he decided to slowly and methodically drive her crazy so that she would be discredited. Luckily for Bella, Mr. Ruff believed her and her husband was captured. Mr. Mellon accused Miss Mellon of things that he did. Paul is a dangerous psychopath running from his past. His wife found a letter with his real name on it, and that's when he started psychologically attacking her. He wanted to portray her as mentally ill to discredit her. That's also the TI's ordeal. All the gaslighting is meant to drive the TI to suicide, violence, or insanity so that she or he will be discredited as too sensitive or weak to handle life's ups and downs. or a dangerous individual, or too crazy to be taken seriously. Miss Mellon was rescued from her husband. The truth came out that he was the insane one, and he was held accountable for his perverse actions. Hopefully, one day, soon, TIs will be rescued from a similar horror. Bella had to deal with gaslighting, harassment, and abuse from only one psychopath. TIs have to deal with something similar from a network of psychopaths. Not all psychopaths are direct murderers like Mr. Mellon, but they torture, torment, and slowly kill their targets. The slow kill method is used in gang stalking, as a TI is tormented every day with the gang stalker's intent on causing extreme harm or death. But that's not how all the gang stalking campaigns end. Some of the TIs speak out at safer moments. Some audience members help at safer moments. And this helps to save innocent lives. The word safer was used because gang stalkers are dangerous. And with their devious, underhanded methods, it's not always safe to help or speak out. So, like Mr. Ruff, TIs and the audience must be careful when dealing with members of the SBP network and or exposing their sadistic nature or raising awareness.